Before we jump into today's video, I just want to let everyone out there know that every video this week was pre-recorded in advance. So things may have changed in between me recording this video and uploading it. Shouldn't be that big of a deal. Just wanted to kind of have this disclaimer in front of my videos this week, just so everybody knows what the deal is. But let's get into the video now. Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today it is time finally to do the power rankings for the 2023 season, and we are going to be kicking that off with the power rankings for the Western region, and on Friday the Eastern region power rankings will be coming out. But today we're going to talk about the 13 teams in the Western region. We've already gotten to see all of these teams in action thanks to the Pro-Am from earlier this month and last month, so thankfully, we have a lot of kind of information to go off of, and we have some stuff to kind of base it off of, but also, who knows how much there is to kind of make from all of that. So you'll see that this is going to be a fun time where there's some spots that are probably not what you expect them to be, but that is the fun of it. Keep in mind, of course, these are my rankings, so you might agree or disagree. It's all kind of arbitrary. You could move a team up or down 2 or 3 spots, and I probably wouldn't get bothered by it. It's all just for fun, so just keep that in mind as we get into this. But if you are excited about this or you enjoy it, consider liking and subscribing for more content like this in the future, and comment down below your own thoughts on my power rankings or your own power rankings, whatever you choose. But without further ado, let's get into it. Let's kick off this ranking at number 13 with the Vegas Eternal. I don't think this is really a surprise to anybody. The Eternal really did not look very good during the Pro-Am. They looked bad last year as well. This current lineup of theirs, minus Vulcan, of course, who was not on the roster last year. But even including, of course, the Pro-Am, 0 wins, right? No wins in the Overwatch League. They bring this roster back from last year. You got to see a lot more out of them, right? And they just did not look good in the Pro-Am. Some of it was, I didn't like their compositional choices. They were running stuff that no one else was running. They were running Far Mercy, which, to be fair, you did see Far Mercy get a decent amount of playtime because of Twisted Mind in the second weekend. But when Twisted Mind ran it, it looked good. It did not work with the Vegas Eternal. They were doing weird stuff with just they're one of the only teams playing a lot of Genji, like, very regularly. It was weird. It was odd. It just did not work. The team did not look very good. They did not look very solid. I think this is a team that has some room to grow still. But considering the offseason that just happened and a lot of talent that's in this region, some time to grow is not going to be enough when you're going up against Lip and Proper and Pelican and, He-Sang and Merritt and all these guys who just have looked phenomenal in Kevster, right? They got to be able to do a lot more than just improve, right? They have to improve by a lot. They don't look to be in a super competitive spot right now. They just have not really inspired much confidence in me. So for me, pretty easy 13 spot for the Vegas Eternal. Just ahead of them at number 12, I have the Los Angeles Valiant. We did see these two teams play in the Pro-Am, and it was not particularly close. The Valiant were able to win that series in a pretty convincing fashion. 2-0 win for them. Obviously, it's only a best of 3, so a little bit of limitation there. But Valiant team, considering they were put together essentially a week before the Pro-Am and they were able to beat the Vegas Eternal, really does kind of say that there is a lot that could go well for this Valiant team going forward. I think that we could see them come out in their first weekend of matches in the regular season after having more time to gel, more time to play, and they could look even better than we saw them. But I still don't think they looked exceptional. I think that they have some playmakers. I think there's a little bit of limitation on their end. I thought Krawi looked good on Ramatra in particular. I thought his Ramatra was very, very good. I'll be curious to kind of see what the tank meta is as we go forward. They don't have flexibility on this roster, really. They only have a 5-man roster with Paintbrush serving as a player coach. But, I don't expect a lot of play time out of him, if any at all. So, it's an interesting roster. They're in an interesting spot in just terms of what they are. But they have at least gotten a win. They've done enough to kind of put themselves in the position to say, hey, we're definitely able to compete with teams in the league around us. Yeah, we struggled against Atlanta, we struggled against London, we struggled against Saints, but when you think about the fact that this roster is so recently put together, it really is not the terrible, kind of end of the world scenario roster that I think a lot of people thought they were when it was announced. It was basically announced right before the Pro-Am started. So all in all, I think the Valiant at least gave me some hope that this is a team that is ascending and can get a lot better. But right now, I can't really put them above 12 because we just haven't really seen a lot from them yet. And like I said, they're pretty limited in what they can run. At number 11, I have the New York Excelsior. They actually did look pretty good in the Pro-Am. I think they're in an interesting spot because I know a lot of their players were not in the U.S. yet. Not all of them were in New York yet. So the team is still kind of spread out. They're still kind of meshing and figuring out what they're going to be. But I did think that they looked pretty good considering what we kind of thought they might be. Now, their roster is not all that bad in terms of just name value. Players like Fitz and Kellen and Shockwave and Lep and Creative, like those are pretty good names we've seen do pretty well in a number of different areas. I think they need to figure out kind of their lineup, their substitutions, who they play when. I really think Fitz is kind of a key part to this roster. I think when he played, they looked the best, but they subbed him out quite a bit. That could have just been a Pro-Am strategy. That could have just been that they wanted to kind of get playtime for all their damaged players, and so they put certain players into certain maps. I don't know what the full story there is. I do think he looked the best, generally speaking. So I want to see them continue to build upon him as a player. I could want to see them kind of continue with that roster as kind of the heart of what they're doing with Fitz in there. I really want to kind of see what they can do fully with their supports as well. We haven't seen any Anian or Halo yet, which I thought we would in the Pro-Am. So I don't yet know what this team's kind of maximum height is. I think they have potential, but we haven't really seen it yet. I still think they have a lot of work to do before they can realize their full potential. But there are some things there, and I think that they are a team that will be interesting to see when they compete against teams like Valiant and Vegas, as well as some of the teams coming up very shortly. That brings us to number 10, which is where I have the Vancouver Titans. I was pretty impressed by the Titans. I thought they played significantly better than I expected so quickly against teams like the Shock and the Mayhem. Like, they had a decently tough group. They did well. They beat the two contenders teams. They lost to the two Overwatch League teams. That's kind of what I would have expected from them in terms of them being an Overwatch League team, but I didn't expect the kind of one-sidedness of their series against Trick Room and Timeless, which is very, very good. I said in my roster breakdown for this roster that I think the biggest problem with Boston last year was DPS. I was not high on Valentine and Victoria. I'm very high on Aspire and Sugar Free. And seeing them play together with Punk, with Faith, with Crimzo, this roster works significantly better than what we saw out of the Boston Uprising a year ago. The skill ceiling is much higher. I think they have way more potential to kind of punch up and beat teams that maybe you don't expect from them. I think they're a really tough out just because Aspire and Sugar Free look so good. Punk really impressed me on the tank role. Not even just kind of the stuff you expect from out of him, but just everything he played, Winston included, which really did impress me quite a bit. I do think this team has some limitations, part of why I have them this low. I don't think that they're going to do great in double flex metas. I think we did see some double flex out of Faith and Crimzo. Didn't really look all that great, so I would like to see them invest in another flex support player. But for now, I do think this is a solid team. I like what they've done a lot. I think they have a lot of potential to be a solid team just based on their kind of core roster. I like what they have here, and I think that this team has way more ability to find success than what we saw from the similarly built Boston roster last year. So despite the somewhat low placement, I do have pretty high faith in what this team is able to do. No pun intended. Coming in at number 9, call them the best of the rest, if you will. The best of the teams that didn't qualify for the single elimination bracket, I have the Washington Justice. Now, I thought the Justice looked way better than I would have expected them to. I honestly thought that the Titans going into the season looked like the better team of the two, but I was very, very impressed by what the Justice were able to do. In particular, Ben Best, who I thought was just a Rhine player. I thought he was going to basically only play Reinhardt. He looked really good on Winston. I thought FD God looked good. I thought Alfie and Flora in particular pounded. I do think that Teru has moments where he looks very good. I do think he has some limitations. I don't think he is the elite level flex support that you would want on a team like this one. You have some players like Ben Best and Alfie and Flora, right, who are kind of legends of the game or becoming legends of the game. But I do think this team impressed me quite a bit. I think that this is a team that they'll have to grow a bit, but I do trust Get Amazed as a coach. I thought he did a very good job when he was coaching the Paris Eternal back in 2021. That team was pretty solid, and I think that this is a team that just has a solid core, a solid foundation. I think they understand what they are. I want to see them kind of continue to build upon what they are. Obviously, that substitution with Mirror, kind of one that a lot of people are hesitant about. A lot of people take issue with going into that final map, or maybe they could have won if Mirror didn't play. That's not kind of his hero that you'd want him in on. That's his map, whatever. A lot of reasons why, and there's kind of defenses of it that the Justice have mentioned. But realistically, I think this team is significantly better than what a lot of people would have expected them to. I honestly wish they had made the top 8. I think it would have been more interesting if they were in the top 8. Maybe that's just hindsight speaking. If they were there instead of the next team that I'm going to talk about, I think maybe the tournament would have been a little bit spicier, a little bit more interesting. But also, there's a chance it wouldn't have been. Who knows? It's tough to say for sure, but I was very impressed by what we saw from the Justice, and so they're sitting here just on the outside of that top 8 in the 9 spot. At number 8, we have the London Spitfire. No real surprise here. They made the top 8, they made the single elimination bracket, and they did not perform well at all. Very, very, very one-sided loss to the Florida Mayhem. Now, the Florida Mayhem, of course, won the whole tournament, so what do you make of that? They lost to arguably the best team of the tournament. That kind of helps, maybe kind of as a defense where you can say, so did a lot of other teams. But even then, I don't think they played particularly well in the group stage. They were the only team to lose a map to the Eternal. They kind of struggled against Saints. They struggled a little bit against the Valiant, not nearly as much. I think that was probably their most complete game that they played, but they did not look great. But I will give them the benefit of the doubt because they did make it into the top 8. They did get to that point, and like I said, the Mayhem had a good enough run that I think you can kind of say, yeah, that was probably more about the Mayhem being really, really complete. I do have worries about this team's limitations. I don't love Hadi as your only tank. I know we saw him pretty much the entire season last season. We didn't see a lot of Poco. I don't think that's the right move, personally. I don't think Hadi is... I think he's a somewhat limited main tank player in general. He's not a Rhine one-trick, but I don't think that he's someone that inspires me when he plays something like Winston, and I wish they would just play to their strengths more when Hadi's in. But sometimes I do question kind of where this team's going to go. If they end up in an off-tank meta, I really don't feel super confident in what this team's going to be able to do there. I do like what we saw out of Sparker. I thought he had a very good tournament. I'm interested in seeing kind of the development of the rest of the players on this roster, how they work in Lethal, how they work in Sky Ripa. But I have a lot of concerns with this team. I'm just not quite convinced that they are at the level they were last year. It's still early. They could obviously make some changes and they could definitely improve. But right now, I have my hesitations with this team, so I'm going to keep them here at 8. As we move into number 7, I just feel the need to say this is where this list becomes incredibly hard to put teams in positions. It becomes incredibly hard to say where a team should go, who's better than the other teams, because we didn't get to see enough competition between a lot of these teams. Obviously, we saw some of them play each other, but we didn't see all of them play each other. So a lot of this comes down to, did they look good in the Pro-Am in the first bit of the Pro-Am? How did they look in the second bit of the Pro-Am? What do I think some of the issues were with them? All that type of stuff. And so it's very, very close. So a team I might have in one spot, and in 2 weeks I might move them up 2 or 3 spots, or I might have them in one spot and I might move them down 2 or 3 spots. This is really just right now how I'm feeling about the teams going into the season. It's a tough one to do. It's a really tough power rankings. It's one of the hardest ones yet. And I think a lot of people will see that and understand that when I reveal that number 7 is the Toronto Defiant. Yes, they had a good performance in the Pro-Am, beating the Boston Uprising in a 3-2 very close series. They did then lose to the Florida Mayhem in a pretty one-sided fashion, though I do think the Mayhem looked solid. They obviously won the whole thing. They looked very good. My biggest reason for keeping Toronto at 7 below the likes of the Boston Uprising, who they beat, is, to me, Toronto, their win was very heavily reliant on, in my opinion, just out-coaching the Boston Uprising. I think the coaching from the Defiant was incredible. I thought they were a very well-coached team. I thought they came in with a game plan that threw the Uprising off, which is why I think in probably 60% of those games, the Uprising win. But the Defiant came in with a game plan that I think helped them get the edge. But when it really came down to just relying fully on that kind of mechanical breakdown, who is the better mechanically skilled team, I think generally speaking, Boston took the advantage there, right? The way they lost, or the way they won on Havana was just kind of them able to kind of impose some of their will. They did not have a good offense, yet they still were able to win with a better defense. They went on push in a kind of mechanical mismatch. So I think Toronto's good. I think their coaching is very, very good. My concern with the Defiant is I think a lot of their strength as a team is going to come early on in the season, because I think that their connection as a roster, their history with each other will help them very early on. As the season progresses, I have a lot more concern about whether or not this roster will continue to be as good as they were. I don't think Speedley looked particularly great. I think Hydron and Kaluge did look good. I thought Surmajed, when he came in, didn't look the best. So I think that this is a team that has talent. I don't think that they have the highs that this tournament may have suggested in a consistent fashion. And so to me, they are down here at 7. But right above them at 6, I have the Boston Uprising. Like I said, I think most of the time those matchups happen, I think the Boston Uprising win. I think the Boston Uprising, mechanically, dominant. I don't think they are quite where they need to be yet as a whole roster, but I think with time, they will become a very, very, very strong kind of unit who understands how to play with each other really well. And you can't discount what they were able to do in the group stage, right? They didn't drop a map in the group stage. They beat the likes of the Gladiators and the Justice, two teams that I rate pretty highly. They didn't really struggle with anyone until they got to Toronto, and even then it was a close series. And a lot of it came down to just map choice. A lot of it came down to compositional choices that I don't think the Uprising were prepared for from the Defiant. So I still feel good about the Uprising, but I definitely feel worse about them than I did going into the Pro-Am, and especially going into that bracket round. I still think they're very good. I think that we saw the talent. I think I want to see a little bit more consistency out of them. Birdwing struggled a bit in that series against the Defiant, but I think ultimately this team's success is going to be on the backs of Birdwing, of Decay, and of Smurf. I think Twilight is a very important piece to this team, and I think that what we get out of Twilight is ultimately the thing that will kind of elevate what this team is able to do, but I don't think Twilight can do it alone, right? Smurf looked good, Decay looked good, but you got to get the hit scan right. You got to get a lot of play and a lot of success out of the whole complete roster. But I'm very excited to see what they're able to do. They definitely did not look perfect, but I'm not going to overreact to one loss in a single elimination bracket. That was a close game against the Defiant, and say that this team is washed or this team's doomed. I think they're fine. I don't think there's a lot of reason to worry. Other good teams lost in the first round too. It's not the end of the world. I'm curious to see where they go from here, but overall, I feel pretty confident about them. So they're sitting here in the top half at number 6. Moving on to number 5, maybe a bit controversial based on their placement in the Pro-Am, but I have the Los Angeles Gladiators. The thing that the Gladiators did improve upon in between the group stage and the bracket round was consistency out of the damage dealers. Kevster, of course, was already doing really, really well. Kai had some moments in the qualifiers where he did not look great, but in the bracket play, when really everything was on the line, kind of you need to be performing well, generally speaking, he looked good. He had some moments where he wasn't hitting the shots you wanted out of him. He wasn't really doing what you kind of needed. That last Havana map in particular kind of stands out as a map where I don't think Kai really had the kind of performance that you would like out of him based on kind of the role he has on this team. But I think as a whole, this team looks still pretty good. I still do think there are some limitations to Dante as a tank player, but he, in my opinion, looks better already than what I expected out of him. I think we'll see him continue to grow and evolve as a player. I think he's going to be a huge part of this team's success, based on how he performs. I think Babel, especially in that game against the Mayhem, was getting picked a lot. It's a huge problem if you cannot keep that support alive. I don't know if that's a communication thing, if that's a positioning thing. I would be curious to see Lastro play a little bit more flex support in that starting role and see if the team looks better or not. Or if that's just a thing they need to work on to kind of keep Babel alive. But that was one of those things I did notice in that kind of finals that really stood out to me. But they did very, very well, right? They had wins against really good teams. But I'm curious to see if that is something that can continue going forward. If they continue to find all of that success going forward. I think what they showed is that when they're playing their best, they can absolutely beat anybody in the league. How much they're able to do that consistently, we'll see. Maybe if they had more time between the series, against the Outlaws and the Mayhem, they would have looked better. Who knows? I'm very impressed by what we saw from them. I think they have a great coaching staff. I think they have a great roster. And so, to me, top 5 feels like the right place for a Gladiators team that a lot of people had written off going into the tournament. Coming in at number 4, I have the Houston Outlaws. They did lose to the Gladiators in a close series, but I don't think that necessarily means the Outlaws are a worse team. The Outlaws, to me, look very, very good. I think there's some compositional stuff that I'm a little concerned about, but I do want to give them the benefit of the doubt that Gargoyle, who is not with the team yet, he's playing from Korea, is a huge part of this team's potential success. Whether or not this team is able to perform well, in those off-tank metas is going to come down to how Gargoyle plays, and he wasn't with the team yet. So I'm going to give them some benefit of the doubt that if he was with the team, they would look better as a unit because they'll have more time to kind of flesh out the relationship, flesh out how they play alongside each other, and they'll be able to perform at a higher level on some of those metas where they have historically looked a little bit weaker. So that's really what I'm looking out for with this team. I think what we saw from Happy and Pelican was really good. Fearless looks really good. Violet and Shu are incredible. They're a phenomenal duo. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that when this team is fully together, one full unit, they're going to look even better. I still think they have some meta limitations, but Gargoyle helps alleviate them pretty significantly. But I do think that this is a team that is very scary, absolutely is, in my opinion, one of the favorites to potentially win the whole league. And so for me, you got to put the Outlaws up with the best of the teams in the league, and so I'm putting them here at number 4. At number 3, I have the Atlanta Reign. This is a team that most of us thought were going to be the favorites, or most of us just thought were going to win the tournament after what we saw from them in the first weekend, but they were unable to get past the LA Gladiators. There are some concerns for me. I would have had them maybe a little bit higher had they not kind of lost the way they did, and had their group been a little bit better from the first weekend where they played 4 pretty weak teams. But I still feel very good about the Reign. When we saw them playing at their best, they looked unmatched. I think mechanically they have some of the best players in the league. Lip, Chio, and Fielder, right? Those are 3 guys right there that are arguably the best in their role. You throw Stalker in, who is an incredible flex DPS player who really plays a very good complement to what Lip's able to do. Hawk and Donghak both looked pretty good. When they came in, Vigilante looks good. So this team looks very, very good. They have a ton of talent. Yes, they lost to the Gladiators. It was a very close series. This kind of grouping of the Reign, Outlaws, and Gladiators are very, very, very close. Right now, I feel a little bit more confident in the Reign based on what we saw from them, despite the fact that they are the only one of these 3 to lose in that first round. I think that they showed a ton of promise and a ton of potential. I think they're still trying to figure some things out. They have a rookie head coach, a first time head coach. So we'll see what happens. But all in all, I think this is a very good team, and I think there's not a lot of reasons to be critical of them. But their performance in the group, the bracket stage, definitely did not inspire me with a ton of confidence in their ability to be an elite level team. So we'll see what happens with them going forward. But to me, number 3 feels like the right spot. Up next at number 2, I have the San Francisco Shock. This team is really, really hard to get a read on because they have been playing on high ping for the entirety of the Pro-Am. So we don't know really how good they will look on low ping. But even for a high ping team, they looked really, really good. They looked scary, they looked dangerous, and they looked like a team that could potentially win the entire league with ease. I think that the big thing is going to come down to how well do they mesh when they get together, how well can they figure out the proper Hisang rotation. We saw times last season where they were trying to figure out what was the best kind of setup for their damage players. Do we put proper in on hit scan? Do we put proper in on flex? What do we kind of do? I think they still need another DPS player. I think they need a hard hit scan player because I think you need to put proper in a position where he can literally just play the best hero possible in any meta. If the most impactful hero is Genji, he needs to be on your Genji. If the most impactful hero is Widow, he needs to be on your Widow. right now, the way that their setup is, that's not the case. But Proper's so flexible, he can play pretty much anything. And he's so talented that even if he's on the second most impactful hero in the composition, he's still going to have high impact because that's just how he plays. They look very, very good. I think the Max and Junbin swapping will be figured out with time. They'll kind of figure out how that settles in. It happened last year with Collusion Mikey, but by the end of the season, they kind of knew what they needed to do and who they needed to run for the majority of the season. But all in all, this is a pretty good team. And I like what we've seen from them. I think they have talent. I think that this is a team that really does sit among the best, right? I don't know what to expect from them fully because of the situation with their visas, or not their visas, their housing or whatever. But I think this is a team that is going to be among the best in the league. I think it's hard to see them not doing well. And so for me, number 2, pretty solid spot. Finally, at number 1, I have the Florida Mayhem. I absolutely did not expect them to be here in this number 1 spot. But their play in the Pro-Am impressed me a lot. It's not just because they won the Pro-Am that I'm putting the number 1. They won the Pro-Am in a very dominating fashion. They dropped 3 maps the entire Pro-Am, 1 to the San Francisco Shock on their first match, and 2 to the Gladiators in the finals. And even that was a pretty one-sided series. They looked very clinical. They looked like the most complete team in the tournament. And to me, they alleviated most of the fears that I had for this team. A thing that most other teams didn't fully do. I was concerned about RuPaul's role on this team. Really, the only English-speaking player is going to be playing the majority of the time for this season. He's they only have the 2 support players. He was the tournament and finals MVP. He was incredible. He played very well. So I'd look at this team. I see what they have in someone, in Checkmate, in Merit, in RuPaul, in Chorong. This is a solid group that just knows how to play with each other, that knows how to get the most out of each other, that just has a really strong understanding of what they are as a team. They have really high peaks. Do I think they're going to win the championship? It's too early to tell. But what I saw from them in the Pro-Am was not just a fluke. They were very complete. They really impressed me with what they were able to do in a somewhat short amount of time together. And I think that they really did elevate my opinion of them in a way that I did not expect. So Florida Mayhem right now, number 1 in my power rankings. So there we go. That's it. That is my power rankings for the Western region for 2023 going into the season. Let me know your thoughts on them in the comments down below. Where do you think I got it right? Where do you think I got it wrong? What is the most heinous spot on this list? Whatever you feel like commenting, as long as you do it respectfully, leave it down below. And like I said at the top of this video, if you enjoyed this video, want more liking in the future, consider liking and subscribing, as your support does help out a bunch with the channel. That is going to be all, though, from me for today. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. Check back in Friday for my APAC power rankings. And until next time, bye-bye.